Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the 33rd Psalm, and the authorship of this is unidentified, but given the fact that the 11th through 32nd and the 34th through the 41st are attributed to David, it is not unlikely that he wrote it, but it is ultimately an inconclusive answer, although the 30th Psalm is dedicated to the house of David, so it may have been sung by Levites and priests at the dedication who came after him, and the temple would have likely been the reference to the house of David, ergo it must have come after him. But in any case, the who wrote it is ultimately inconsequential as what is written therein. So we're going to not posit any author, although we believe it may have been written by David, and just get right to it. The opening verse of which reads, "Now this psalm, among other things, gives eloquent expression to Yahweh's creative prowess, but that is not the whole of the psalm, but that is very much the focal point thereof." So the opening verse reads, "Shout for joy in Yahweh, you righteous. Praise is fitting for the straight." Praise is the righteous response, and joy and positive vibrations are befitting of the righteous and the saints and the straight, those who walk on the straight and narrow. It is the natural response to all that he is and all that he has done. And as we will read, he created the entire universe and everyone in it, so we owe our lives to him, and how we live that life, if life is his gift to us, how we live that life can be our gift to him. Praise Yahweh with the lyre. Sing to him with an instrument of 10 strings. Now, the Psalms, though they survive posterity as poetry, they were in fact originally sung as hymnals in worship services, accompanied by musical instruments. We aren't privy to the notation, but we do get a glimpse, the notation of the musical composition, although we do get a glimpse of what instruments may have gone into these Psalms in this and other places. Sing to him a new song. Play sweetly with a shout of joy. So that we are to play and sing is self-evident, but we are instructed not only that, but how, and we are to do it with a shout of joy. That is the natural response to all of his goodness, and it is the not extra credit, but the minimum obligation we owe to him. For the word of Yahweh is straight, and all his works are in truth. Now, the word is multifaceted in the Bible. It is a reference to the word, which is identified as Yahshua in John 1 and 1 John 1:1. And it is also identified as the word, the scripture, but and it is much more extensive than that. It is also the spoken word of Yahweh in any form. So he does not limit himself exclusively to the writings of the prophets, that is, to limit his word in all of its abundance. It is, in fact, much more extensive than that, and we owe it to ourselves and to him to familiarize ourselves in as much as we are able with the word in all of its varieties and components. Loving righteousness and justice. The earth is filled with the kindness of Yahweh. So the earth is a testament and a reflection of his goodness, so much so that upon created it, he declared everything in sight good, Genesis 1:31. And it is very much an act of kindness that he created us. He didn't need us. He is a self-sufficient, self-existent, superabundant being, but he created us because he loved us and because he loves us, and that is our reason for existence. It is very much an act of kindness, and we are instructed and admonished to love righteousness and justice, and these are the just responses of the saints. By the word of Yahweh the heavens were made, and all their hosts by breath of his word. Therein we learn that the word carries creative connotations. In Genesis 1:3, we read that he said, "Let there be light," and it was simply like that. So it's literally that simple for him. What he wills, what he wishes becomes a reality, and what he promises will eventually come true, maybe not right away or as fast as we would like, but that it demands endurance and faith. But the entire heavens and earth were spoken into existence at the foundation of the world. Gathering the waters of the sea together as a heap, laying up the deep in a storehouses. So there is no physical obstacle, even though he is an immaterial being. There is no physical obstacle which is too great for him to manipulate or manage or control, including the waters of the sea. He can make it appear or manifest at will or do what he wills, and that is testament to his creative prowess and a witness of his omnipotence, which is the attribute of unlimited or infinite strength. Let all the earth fear Yahweh. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. Now, fear of Yahweh is the fear which expels all other fears, and if we fear Yahweh, we will not fear death or what man can do to us, but we will happily embrace them, even if they want to kill us, harm us, hurt us, or persecute us. So, everyone who is inhabiting the world at any given place or time in any historical context should stand in awe of him. Sadly, the majority of the world acknowledge him not, and even those who claim to have a belief are sorely deficient in their belief. Their lifestyle does not reflect it. They do not fear him or the punishment of hell. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood fast. Once again, the creative act was seriously that simple. Now, science is incompetent to explain the origin of anything, but the theological explanation is that an immaterial being gave order and motion to all material, the whole material universe and world. Yahweh brings the counsel of the nations to naught. He thwarts the plans of the people. So as wise or as clever as man might be, or any nation or its rulers might think they are ultimately infinitesimal compared to the wisdom of Yahweh, which is the attribute of omniscience, which pertains to his unlimited or infinite intelligence. So much so that I think Job 5:11, whoever speaks in that chapter, claims that he he catches the wise and the clever in their schemes and thwarts them all. Terrible paraphrase, but the sentiment is, I believe, accurate. The counsel of Yahweh stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. There is an eternal aspect to the counsel and will and the plan of Yahweh, and his plans are relevant to each and every generation. It being eternal, that means there is some application each generation can and should deduce from it. And our plans are to be submitted to his plans, and our will subordinate to his will. And this, the natural man naturally resists submission and anything along those lines into a higher authority and a higher power. But this is the foolish course of action, which we who follow the straight and narrow are know better. Blessed is the nation whose Elohim is Yahweh, the people whom he has chosen as his own inheritance. Now, in the Old Covenant times, this would have been a reference to Israel, which remained a united country under, well, he did rule Judah for 7 years before ruling the entirety of Israel for 33 years. But the nation was originally foreordained for a divine purpose to be the chosen people. By the new covenant, the chosen people of Elohim expands to is more expansive than any nation, but is the pan-national assembly, which observes no national, racial, gender, socioeconomic barriers, restrictions, or exclusions. Any and all who are humble enough to submit to the source have the right and can claim the benefits of being his children. Yahweh has looked from the heavens. He has seen all the sons of man. So he is omnipresent. That means he is capable of being everywhere and all at once. And this is not to mistake the erroneous conception of pantheism, whereby every rock and created item is elevated artificially to an equality with divinity, so that there's no place for that in the Judeo-Christian tradition. I believe the Hindus and a few other religions espouse such a view. and he's capable of seeing all the sons of men, not only in their outer appearance, but he's also capable of discerning the hearts, and it is according to that which we are to be judged. He looked from his dwelling place on the inhabitants of the earth. Now, this phrase carries a distinctly more negative connotation in Psalm 14:1 and 51:3, where he is scanning the earth to find any who are righteous, and of course the tragic answer is there is no, not one, and that is not to suggest that humanity does not possess righteousness in degrees. It is only to say that our own righteousness is as filthy rags before him who is without blemish, Isaiah 64:5. But here we're going to read in the next verse what that means by when he's looking at the entire human race on the earth at any given time. He who fashions the heart of them all, he who understands all their works. Again, I earlier mentioned that he judges us according to the hearts because he is able to discern the invisible qualities, he being an invisible and immaterial being. And he also created the hearts of men, and the heart was believed by the ancients to be at least the Greeks. Aristotle believed that the heart was the center of cognitive activity. Later science would prove it would be the brain. But the king is not saved by the multitude of an army. A mighty man is not delivered by great strength. So as a king, he had he was a warrior king, and he commanded armies and had them at his disposal, but yet he remained mindful of the fact that the victory was not in the might of men, but the might of the Elohim in whom they walked, and he is able, there is no size of any enemy or army which he is not able to overcome. We read Jonathan, the friend of David and the son of Saul, giving expression to this in 1 Samuel 14:6. A horse is a vain means of safety, neither does it rescue any by its great power. So a horse is an instrument of war, and they are a strong, fast, and physically impressive being, but ultimately inferior as a source of refuge or security compared to the omnipotent one. Once more, omnipotence is the reference to his attribute of infinite or unlimited strength. So he's not to place faith in armies, weapons, or any instruments of war, but to walk in Yahweh's way, and that guarantees his victory. See, the eye of Yahweh is on those fearing him, on those waiting for his kindness. Now, his eyes are, strictly speaking, expansive across the whole earth, but we are identified as the apple of his eye in Deuteronomy 32:1, which applies equally to the Old Covenant Jews as it does the New Covenant Christians. And so we are an especial source of attention and affection for his eye. And we, those who wait for his kindness, often demands an aspect of endurance and patience, because the blessings of Yahweh do not always immediately manifest, and the promises are not always immediately fulfilled, maybe not as fast as we would like them to be, but that demands faith and exercises it accordingly. To deliver their being from death, and to keep them alive during famine. So he is capable of, David gives eloquent expression to the doctrine of resurrection without mentioning the word in Psalm 16, most specifically verse 10, where he says, a terrible paraphrase once more, warning, is that he will not let thy sacred one see corruption, or the bowels of Sheol, which was synonymous with hell. So, and he is capable of maintaining the life of his saints even when famine strikes. So there is no, we are to eat the bread of life, which is a spiritual feeding, which is superior in fulfillment and satisfaction to any morsel of bread or any item of physical food. Our being has longed for Yahweh. Our help and our shield is he. Now, David is identified implicitly as a man after Elohim's own heart in 1 Samuel 13:14, and more explicitly in Acts 13:22, and this is reflective of that nature. He longed for Yahweh, he thirsted for him, he hungered for him. These are verbs he elsewhere uses to describe his longing and his greatest desire, which was to be in the presence of the Almighty, who protected him and blessed him and was the source of his worship and affection and ultimate attention. For our heart rejoices in him, for we have put our trust in his sacred name. Now, the source of trust is an infallible and inerrant source of trust, so any trust invested in anything else is ultimately an inferior foundation of security and trust. And men have the natural propensity to betray those who trust them, but Yahweh will not betray any of his own. He is literally incapable of doing so. Let your kindness, O Yahweh, be upon us, even as we wait for you. So once more, this demands the virtue of patience and an aspect of endurance, but he's praying to let his kindness, his good nature, subsume them in the course of waiting thereof, and that is something we would be wise to pray for the same. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.